substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live, and our website is wallbuilderslive.com. We also have wallbuilders.com, wealth of information at both websites. We have so many that have paid the ultimate price, more than 1.2 million, that sacrificed for us and our freedom. And then we have an awful lot of veterans alive today that we also like to honor, and we get the privilege of interviewing some of those guys and gals from all the way back to World War II.
We do, and it is a real thrill to hear their story and hear what they went through, because I love these guys because they're quiet heroes, and unless you can drag the story out of them, usually you don't get it. And in this case, we have a family member who's kind of helped drag the story out of her father, and so you find out some really cool stuff. And I'm anticipating this one a lot because I think there's some things here that we don't even think about much. And as many interviews as you and I have done, I think we'll hear some things today that may even be new for us. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun with this interview.
And a little bit unique. I mean, as many veterans as we've interviewed, I don't remember that we've ever done this before. We're going to have a World War II veteran with us, and his daughter's going to be with us as well. So that'll be kind of cool. We'll get both perspectives. Stay with us. William Luke, World War II veteran, will be with us when we come back, and his daughter Elizabeth. Stay with us on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Crime is one of America's most serious problems today. Its effects reach not only the direct victims of its violence, but even those who have not been attacked. The concern for crime has not been limited to this century, however. Our founding fathers were also concerned about it. Yet the effects of crime unquestionably were much less in their generation. So what was their deterrent to crime? Signer of the Constitution James McHenry answered that question. He explained, "The Holy Scriptures can alone secure to society order and peace. In vain, without the Bible, we increase penal laws and draw protections around our institutions. Bibles are strong defenses. Where they abound, men cannot pursue wicked courses." Founding Father James McHenry believed that widely teaching the Bible was the best means to deter crime.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live, and we're thrilled today to have a special guest with us, World War II veteran William Luke. Mr. Luke, thank you for coming on, sir.
Well, thank you.
And we're also honored to have his daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Well, you guys have a great project that just came out, a new book published called Dear Bob. Mr. Luke, it's letters from you to your brother over about 20 years or so, and it recounts a lot of the things from your life. And that's what we want to talk about today is your service, your military service, the time you spent in the Philippines, and just the impact that had on you and the things that were going on there. And kind of want to get a little bit of the background. I mean, how did you end up initially joining the military, and what made you to decide on joining the Navy? And then let's talk about how you ended up in the Philippines.
Okay. I was a ski instructor up in Michigan at one of the lodges up there when I was about 15, 16 years old, and I was pretty good. And I was getting it, that all the other one of kids like my age, and we got to 18, and we're going to be drafted. And then one time in December, the principal wanted to talk to me, and I said, "Okay, well, now what have I done?" And he said, "There's two people I want to talk to you," and they were from the 10th Mountain Division in Colorado, and they said that we need two ski instructors very badly here, and they wanted me to to join the 10th Mountain Division. And I said, well, I haven't been given anything. I'll be I'll be going in June, and we'll be drafted. And I decided to go in the Navy because I'd have a bunk to sleep on instead of a snowdrift. And it was simple as that. And my brother was already in Chicago in medical school, and he was making things for me to do when they come out, and we'll work the doctors together. I don't want to do that. I'm a ski instructor anyway.
Well, with him being in medical school, was that part of why you wanted to be a Navy corpsman?
Oh, no. I got to be a corpsman because I was on a ski patrol when I was still teaching skiing. And when they saw that I was a ski instructor, I had those things going for me. And they said, well, okay, we'll take and put you as a corpsman.
So
that was fine with me.
So tell me about how you ended up in the Philippines.
Well, they set up a new hospital in the Navy they were doing it for the purpose of having a hospital when we take off the mainland of Japan. And there was about 2,000 of us, and we went back in California, back in Marine tap all over in boot camp again, and we were doing that. And the whole 144 went into there in Philippine Islands on the island of Samar, and of course after the president let the bomb go, everything was gone, and all the old guys were getting discharged, and they had 150 points and 100 points, and I had 12.
So you had to stay.
I stayed another day, another whole year.
Yeah, Rick, if I might jump in here.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
I'm a U.S. history teacher, so I can give a little bit of background on what Dad was saying. A lot of people understand what D-Day was, but very few people understand that the United States was preparing for what was going to be called X-Day, which was the proposed invasion of the island, the mainland of Japan. And that's what Dad was doing on the island of Samar in the Philippines. He and the other Seabees, if you're familiar with the movie South Pacific, he and the other Seabees were building these hospitals in anticipation of the invasion of the island of Japan. And the military understood that this was such a grave undertaking that there would probably be at least 1 million American casualties, not to mention the millions of Japanese civilians and soldiers that would have perished had we actually hit the mainland. And that was one of the reasons that President Truman weighed using Fat Man and Little Boy, of course, the atomic bombs, rather than invading Japan. And so that's what Dad was doing, along with the other Seabees, 2,000 of them, building these Quonset hut-type hospitals on the island in preparation for that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Elizabeth, because often when our family goes and we speak and we talk about America's history and our principles and what make us different, one of the things that I always mentioned is that most nations, well, every nation in history that ever had a technological advantage in war, they used it to conquer their neighbors. We're the only ones that when we had the advantage in 1945, we didn't use it to conquer our neighbors. We used it to end a war, and we saved millions of lives as a result of using that bomb. And you just described why. And like you said, most people don't ever think about that millions more would have been lost if we had to invade Japan.
Yes, and President Truman was asked about this decision years later, and he said, I really never had a second thought. It was the only option that we had.
Yeah.
We had to stop this. And he weighed 150,000 lives in 3 days, as opposed to 6 million more, perhaps, that would have been lost because the Japanese simply were not giving up. And Dad saw that firsthand as he was helping to build the hospitals and helping to stop the bleeding and heal the soldiers and sailors that were coming in from various battles around the South Pacific.
Well, and that's a whole other perspective that I've never thought of, that in these massive military operations that you have to think that far in advance, that you would actually be building hospitals to deal with what's going to happen, 6 months later or a year later.
Right.
That they were doing that there in the Philippines. And so, Mr. Luke, that was part of what you were doing there. There's a story I got to ask you about, and it's the covert mission that you were asked to take part in that time when you went down to the beach, because we've actually had some other guests on our program that were on the Indianapolis. We'll get that story when we return. Stay with us. William Luke, our guest here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, we heard that our founding fathers were largely atheists, agnostics, or deists. The writings of founding father Richard Henry Lee strongly refute that assertion. Richard Henry Lee was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he is specifically the man who made the motion in Congress that America separate from Great Britain. Following his death, his papers and correspondence, including numerous original handwritten letters from other prominent founding fathers, were passed on to his grandson. After having studied those letters, this was how the grandson described our founding fathers. He declared, "The wise and great men of those days were not ashamed publicly to confess the name of our blessed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In behalf of the people, as their representatives and rulers, they acknowledged the sublime doctrine of His mediation."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today, World War II veteran William Luke. We're talking about his experience in the Philippines. And as we were going to break, we were just about to hear the story, Mr. Luke, of what happened to you there on the Philippines that had to do with the U.S.S. Indianapolis, the greatest loss of life in naval history. If I recall, it was about 300 survivors out of the 1,200 on the ship when it went down, and you actually had an experience with those survivors.
Well, the hospital was almost completed, and we were called into the Master of Arms and said, we're going to give you each of your ambulance, and you follow the Jeep. And I'm telling you now, you're not to discuss this with anyone else. And we got in the ambulances, and we went over to the main. We didn't have any docks in there, and it was right on the shoreline. And we pulled up in the shoreline, and we were waiting. And about half an hour, maybe an hour later, I looked out into the sea, and I could see a boat that was splashing and coming in, and it was coming closer to the shoreline. And when it finally pulled up, they didn't drop the bottom like to get that boat. We just pulled up, and we ran over to it and looked inside, and what we looked inside was unbelievable. They were sitting there, and several of them were naked, and they were ready. They were just going like they were going into shock. And we took them off, and we virtually picked them up and carried them onto the shore into the ambulance. And we took them to our ambulance, to the place where we did. And when we pulled up again, I figured, well, there's something hot on this thing. They had a cordon of Marines around their weapons. And again, we were told, you do not discuss this with anyone else. And that happened. It's a small thing happened to me in that, but in comparison, what happened out there at the sea.
Well, it was one of our well, I guess it still remains today. The greatest single loss of life at sea for the Navy was the Indianapolis going down, and for you to even be there and witness those survivors that came in is incredible. What is probably that's probably the one that stands out in your mind the most. But next to that, what's the next thing that stands out in your mind from your service?
Well, I'll go back to high school. All of us were waiting to get drafted. And we would discuss, what are you going to go? Where would you want to go? Air Force. Well, the Air Force wasn't taking. The Marines weren't taking draftees, but we could take a choice of the Army or the Navy. And I had been in skiing a long time, and I wanted to try something else, so that's why I took the Navy. So I took the Navy and got drafted with that, and went through boot camp and Great Lakes, and after that, to the South Pacific.
Well, we are a grateful nation, and we thank you for giving of those early years of your life so that our nation could remain free, and so that generations later we could live the benefit of your service and sacrifice, and so many others. Elizabeth, I got to ask you about the project. So tell me about Dear Bob and why you think it's important for people to get to see a little bit from this greatest generation through the eyes of your dad and the letters.
Okay. Dear Bob, again, like Dad said, it's a compilation of letters that he had written to my Uncle Bob over 20 years or so. And when my mother passed away in May of 2012, Dad and I were together a lot, and we were kind of looking for a project to do to keep each other busy more than anything. And I found the letters and started to retype them. And then Dad had a stroke in February of 2012. And so I said, hey, instead of you having to write, why don't you just record? I got him a tape recorder, and he started to record his stories, and I was able to transcribe what he did. And the stories that I had heard my entire life, my entire childhood, kind of grew legs and took on a life of their own and turned out into this book that we call Dear Bob. And it starts out with Dad as a small child in the Great Depression, goes on to him being a young teenager when he hears of Pearl Harbor being attacked, and then his years in the service. And not all of it is heavy war stuff. If you read Dear Bob and you look at his years in the service, certainly he understood his mission. We have to win the war. We have to save the world, so to speak. But there's a lot of humorous things that happened in the war. I mean, you look at the movie South Pacific, and there is such a parallel to what was going on in the South Pacific. But then the stories continue after the war, when we had millions of soldiers coming home, and of course the 1950s and the baby boom. Dad and Mom were part of that. So was I. I'm part of the baby boomers. And then moving on. So Dear Bob is not just the story of one man's life, but it really parallels so many of our greatest generation's lives and the things that they did. Everybody has a story. And Dad's story is just one drop in the bucket of the many millions of Americans who served in that greatest generation.
You guys have done exactly what David Barton and I are always recommending after we have an interview like this with one of the greatest generation. We say, hey, families, record these conversations, get this information from these loved ones, and share these stories so they can be passed down generation after generation. You took it one step further. Not only did you record the interviews, but now you've made it possible through the book for other people to enjoy it, because I guarantee you there are millions of families that didn't do that did not capture those memories. So here's a way probably to reignite their memories by sharing in your father's memories.
That's right. And you can get the book Dear Bob by William A. Luke. It's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, AuthorHouse.com, and it's a fun read. Got lots of pictures in it. There's some great shots of the Philippines in there, and it's just a really neat way for people to enjoy our family's history, Dad's story, but to reflect on their own. And as I said, I'm a U.S. history teacher, and when Dad came in and spoke to my juniors in high school about U.S. history, we asked, how many of you have grandparents who were in the Second World War? And so many hands went up. We said, sit down with them, talk to them, get their stories, because this is part of history. Every one of them is an American hero.
Well, I hope it inspires others to do exactly the same. Elizabeth, thank you for your time. Mr. Luke, God bless you. Thank you for your service. We appreciate both of you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank y'all for coming on. Back in a moment with David Barton.
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation. about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. We're back with David Barton now. Special thanks to William Luke and to his daughter Elizabeth for taking time to be with us today. David, sounds like they're doing, or she's doing, exactly what we've encouraged listeners to do for years, in sitting down with that relative that served and getting their story.
Well, and because she did that, we got some really good stuff. I mean, the part she added to and explaining some of the background, I thought was really cool. But you know, Mr. Luke, it was great from the very beginning. You know, there he is, a ski instructor up in Michigan, and the 10th Mountain Division comes to him, and those are great guys. I've been able to speak at the 10th Mountain Division before and done some stuff with them. They were great guys. And that 10th Mountain Division, those are the snow boys. Those are the ones that handle snow. I've got a kid in the military right now. I got two kids in the military, but one of them is part of what they call the Arctic Warriors. And where he is right now, their winters run about 40 below zero up there. Whew. And he just, in this last winter, they had an exercise where they spent 10 days in the field. Now, you know, I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with 10 days at 40 below zero in the field, but they did that. But I can understand why Mr. Luke said he'd much rather sleep on a bunk than a snowdrift. I mean, that whole lot of empathy goes with that. And what Elizabeth said too, I thought was really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard it called X Day before. I mean, I knew D Day, but I didn't know X Day.
No, I hadn't either. That's the first time I've heard that.
And that was cool. But the aspect of up to 6 million casualties, you know, and I've seen some teachers who criticize dropping the atomic bomb, Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb, because it did, you know, take out 150, 160,000 folks. That's a whole lot less than 6 million. And I don't think I'd ever heard before the account that they were building mobile hospitals to send in to handle all those million American casualties and 6 million total casualties.
Yeah, I hadn't either. It really brought it in perspective why it was not an easy decision, but why the decision could be made on Truman's part. You can imagine if they had been doing all that planning, it was crystal clear in his mind what it was going to cost in lives if they did have to go in. And I've heard World War II vets say, you know, look, that had gone, you know, fought at Iwo Jima or fought at Saipan or some of these islands where they said, look, we're telling you, we know if we had to go into Japan, it would have been exactly those numbers that everybody estimated.
Yeah, and you know, that's something we just don't cover in the books today at all. And that was news to me, you know, X Day, and that we were literally building in advance those mobile hospitals, those Quonset hut hospitals to handle those million American casualties. Man, how many would you have to build to handle a million American casualties? And you know, I think of quartermaster who has to get everything ready for war, but I know they did this in Operation Desert Storm, and as they went into Afghanistan, they sent over thousands of coffins because they knew they were going to need the coffins as well to bury these guys in first Iraq and then Afghanistan. Well, as it turned out, in Iraq and Desert Storm, there really was a providential intervention. They had that windstorm that came through. Colonel Ammerman's told us about how that the wind blew out of the wrong direction for a number of days. It uncovered thousands of mines that the Iraqis had laid there that would have killed hundreds and hundreds of Americans. And as it turned out, they were able to walk through the desert and see every single mine because the wind had blown the dirt, the sand off the mines. They could see every one of them.
Amazing.
And so they ended up using those coffins as, not for burial, but they used them for baptisms. As guys were getting saved and coming to Christ, they used those coffins. They filled them with water, were baptizing guys in them. So, you know, but I never thought, how would you get 1 million coffins ready. I mean, and the medical is just, it was stuff, and the talking to that covert mission where they went down and dealt with the Indianapolis.
Which, by the way, I got to say, bro, that's pretty awesome to use those coffins for a rebirth instead of for death.
That's right.
I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, that is real cool. And I don't know, you remember 2 years ago, Glenn Morgan, we had on the program.
Yes.
And Glenn was one of those survivors off the Indianapolis. And let me see if I can put this in perspective. This goes back to July of 1945. The Indianapolis was a cruiser, a large Navy cruiser, and it had just delivered the parts for the atomic bomb. And it was on its way back from delivering those parts when it got hit by a Japanese submarine. Now, that big cruiser sank and was completely underwater in a total of 12 minutes. I mean, try to get below deck and up on top in 12 minutes, especially when it's listed. That was amazing. They had nearly 1,200 crewmen, and 300 went down with the ship, so there were 900 left. But those 900 were afloat, and they were days afloat. It was 4 days after the ship went down before the Navy even learned that the ship had gone down. And so 4 days later, one of the amphibious planes of the Navy spotted some survivors, and as it turned out, they were able to pick up 317 survivors out of the 900 who had not been killed when the ship went down. So, and Glenn Morgan is one of those. And so here now we've got Mr. Luke being one of the guys who goes down and treats those 317 survivors. I mean, what an amazing story this has been.
Incredible. Thank you to William Luke for his time today and his daughter Elizabeth. Check out the book, and we appreciate you listening today. Be sure and honor a veteran today. If you've got a relative that went through some of those things, get their story so you can pass it to future generations. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.